Hello, dear listeners. We stand now at a turning point in history. What appeared to be a minor administrative disruption in the Georgia immigration incident has proven to be the opening shot of a massive tectonic shift. This was not merely a violation of legal procedures, but the moment when decades of accumulated American trust capital evaporated in an instant. What is trust? Economists call it social capital. Nobel Prize winner Kenneth Arrow said, "Trust is the hidden element of every commercial transaction." At the national level, trust is even more crucial. It is the invisible force that backs currency value, guarantees the implementation of international contracts, and maintains the loyalty of allies. What happened in Georgia was precisely the moment when this foundation of trust began to shake. Violations of rights against legal residents, disregard for due process, undermining of constitutional principles, all erupted simultaneously. Like cracks appearing in a dam, causing water to leak, the vulnerabilities of the massive American system began to show. Korea did not miss this moment. It began seeking a new path, breaking free from the subordinate alliance relationship that had lasted for 70 years. This is not simple anti-American sentiment. Rather, it is a strategic choice based on cold realpolitik. As international relations scholar John Mearsheimer said, this is the practical application of balance of power theory. States seek balance for survival. This audiobook analyzes from multiple angles the changes in international order triggered by the Georgia crisis, Korea's strategic response, political divisions within America, international loss of confidence, and the possibility of a new order emerging. We will explore together the most important changes of our time. Chapter 1. Georgia's Fracture. The moment imperial lawlessness is revealed. To understand the essence of the Georgia immigration crisis, we must first recognize that this was not a simple administrative error. This was a systematic and deliberate violation of rights. What occurred simultaneously was a violation of due process as defined in administrative law and a disregard for the Equal Protection Clause emphasized in constitutional law. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, it was starkly revealed how selectively the rule of law that America so proudly touted was actually applied. While providing strict legal protection to its own citizens, it flip-flopped in its attitude toward foreigners with double standards. According to legal philosopher Ronald Dworkin's theory of law's integrity, a true rule of law society must show equal concern and respect for all individuals. But what happened in Georgia was the exact opposite of this principle. It was discriminatory administrative action, targeting specific groups. Even more interesting is the international legal implications of this incident. The United States is a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention and a major party to international human rights covenants. The Georgia crisis was a clear violation of these international obligations. As international law scholar Antonio Cassese emphasized, violation of international law means not just a legal problem, but the loss of a state's moral authority. The most devastating result this incident brought was trust damage. A sharp decline in what economics calls reputation capital occurred. In game theory's explanation of repeated games, one betrayal significantly reduces all future possibilities for cooperation. The Georgia crisis was precisely such a moment of betrayal. The shock to Asian countries was particularly significant. With Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and other traditional US allies proceeding with large-scale investments, sudden administrative instability sharply increased investment risk. It was the moment when political risk in investment theory materialized. What's noteworthy here is that this incident demonstrates the butterfly effect of chaos theory. A small administrative disruption resulted in shaking the entire global trust system. It was an instance of the sudden phase transition phenomenon explained in complexity science occurring in international politics. What America lost was not simply face, it lost the moral authority that is core to soft power. The soft power defined by Joseph Nye is the attractiveness that makes other countries want to follow voluntarily. But the Georgia crisis fundamentally damaged this attractiveness. Chapter 2: Korea's Awakening, a paradigm shift from dependence to independence. Korea's reaction was remarkably swift and strategic. It began seeking a new path, breaking away from the America-dependent diplomatic line that had lasted for 70 years. This is the typical hedging strategy shown by middle powers during what international relations calls power transition periods. Looking through political economist Albert Hirschman's exit voice loyalty framework, Korea is moving from loyalty to voice and gradually toward exit. Of course, this doesn't mean complete severance. Rather, it's a sophisticated approach aimed at securing strategic autonomy. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, the reason Korea could change direction so quickly was that distrust toward America had already accumulated considerably. The background included the THAAD deployment conflict, pressure in defense cost-sharing negotiations, and ambiguous mediation in Korea-Japan conflicts. Korea's new strategy consists of three main axes. First is economic diversification. It's a complex approach that reduces dependence on China while simultaneously lowering dependence on America. This is the geopolitical application of risk diversification strategy in portfolio theory. Second is strengthening middle power diplomacy. It's an attempt to break away from the US-China bipolar structure and form a third pole through cooperation with India, Australia, Canada, and Nordic countries. This is the modern application of balance of power theory proposed by international relations scholar Hedley Bull. Third is securing technological sovereignty. It's a strategy to escape technological dependence by building independent ecosystems in semiconductors, batteries, and AI fields. According to Schumpeter's creative destruction theory, technological innovation is the most powerful force that can overturn existing power structures. Korea's transformation can be explained by complex adaptive system theory. It's a process where the entire system finds a new equilibrium point in response to rapid environmental changes. It's similar to what biology calls adaptive radiation. Particularly noteworthy is Korea's soft power utilization strategy. It began using the global pro-Korea network built through cultural content like K-pop, K-dramas, and Korean films as diplomatic assets. This is a case of implementing Gramsci's cultural hegemony theory in actual diplomacy. The most interesting part of Korea's reaction is its framing strategy. Rather than framing the deteriorating relationship with America as anti-American, it framed it as independence and diversification. This is strategic communication that sophisticatedly utilizes the framing effect in cognitive science. Going deeper, Korea's transformation can also be interpreted from the perspective of historical, cyclical theory. According to Toynbee's challenge and response theory, civilizations develop when they respond creatively to external challenges. The Georgia crisis was such a historical challenge for Korea, and Korea began a creative response. Chapter 3: Asia's new balance weight, Japan's dilemma, and China's opportunity. The changes occurring in the Asian region are like watching a giant chess game. Each country is carefully making moves to find new equilibrium points. Japan's dilemma, in particular, provides an interesting case study. Japan has traditionally maintained the closest alliance relationship with the United States. However, since the Georgia crisis, subtle changes are being detected within Japan as well. While emphasizing the alliance relationship on the surface, it has actually begun seeking alternatives from a risk management perspective. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, Japan's situation is truly ironic. While under America's nuclear umbrella protection, it has fallen into a security dilemma when America's reliability is questioned. This is a structure similar to the prisoner's dilemma in game theory. Japan's response strategy is divided into two main directions. One is strengthening the alliance to solidify ties with America even more, and the other is strengthening independent capabilities to prepare alternatives. This can be called the security version of diversified investment strategy in portfolio theory. Particularly noteworthy is Japan's Indo-Pacific strategy. This is an attempt to break away from the US-centered hub and spoke system and build multilateral networks. It's a strategic approach to increase centrality in network theory. On the other hand, China views this situation as a golden opportunity. America's declining credibility is a window of opportunity for China. However, China's approach differs from past direct influence expansion. It's using more sophisticated and indirect methods. China's new strategy is a hybrid approach, combining soft power and economic interdependence. The main tools include infrastructure investment through Belt and Road, economic integration through RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and relationship improvement through cultural exchange. What's interesting here is that China is emphasizing win-win games rather than zero-sum games. This is a strategy pursuing positive-sum games in game theory. Of course, this may not be pure altruism, but it's certainly different from past coercive approaches. The changes occurring in the Asian region can be explained by complexity theory. The butterfly effect, where one small change alters the dynamics of the entire system, is appearing. As each country adapts to find new equilibrium points, unexpected new patterns are emerging.
Korea's changing role is particularly noteworthy. If it previously played a balancer role between America and China, it now seeks to form an independent third axis. This presents a new model of middle power diplomacy in international relations.
These changes are not limited to just the geopolitical dimension. New connections are being created in all areas, including economy, technology, and culture. This can be seen as the international expansion of the network society, described by sociologist Manuel Castells. Chapter 4: Europe's Strategic Awakening, a Declaration of Independence across the Atlantic. Europe's reaction was even more dramatic than Korea's. The Georgia crisis was an event that starkly showed European leaders America's credibility crisis. The EU's response, centered particularly on Germany and France, can be summarized with the keyword strategic autonomy. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, the reason Europe could move so quickly was that it had already been preparing for post-America since Trump's first term. Having experienced NATO burden-sharing disputes, withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, and exit from the Paris Climate Agreement, trust in America was already considerably shaken. Germany's change is particularly noteworthy. Germany, which had maintained Atlanticism for 70 years after the war, is now turning toward Eurocentrism. This means not just a change in foreign policy, but a change in Germany's identity itself. From Benedict Anderson's imagined community theory perspective, Germany is changing the reference group that defines itself. France is even more proactive. Macron's concept of European sovereignty is becoming more concrete after the Georgia crisis. This can be called the 21st century version of de Gaulle's Europe for Europeans vision. Geopolitically, France seeks to position itself as an independent regional power, rather than under America's patronage. The EU's new direction consists of three main axes. First is defense integration. It seeks to reduce dependence on NATO through creating an EU common army, expanding the European Defence Fund, and jointly developing weapon systems. This is the internal balancing strategy in neo-realist international relations. Second is economic decoupling. Efforts to reduce dollar dependence and enhance the euro's international status are accelerating. Particularly noteworthy is the expansion of dollar bypass payment systems like Instex, instrument in support of trade exchanges. This is the multipolarization of reserve currency phenomenon in economics. Third is securing technological sovereignty. It seeks to reduce dependence on American big tech through completing the digital single market, European cloud projects, and AI development investment. According to Schumpeter's technological innovation theory, technological superiority converts to economic and political superiority. Europe's transformation can also be interpreted as a return to historical patterns. In the 19th century balance of power system, Europe did not tolerate hegemony by any single country. Current changes can be seen as a revival of such traditional European diplomacy. Particularly interesting is the formation of new connections between Europe and Asia. Examples include strengthening the EU-Korea Strategic Partnership, the Europe-India Connectivity Partnership, and the EU-ASEAN Comprehensive Partnership. This can be called a Rimland Alliance strategy that overturns geopolitical Halford Mackinder's heartland theory. What's noteworthy here is Europe's soft power utilization strategy. It seeks to secure moral superiority by putting forward values like human rights, environment, and rule of law. According to Gramsci's hegemony theory, true dominance is achieved through consent, not coercion. Europe is pursuing precisely such consent-based leadership. However, Europe's strategy also has limitations. These include differences in interests among member states, security threats from Russia, and America's still strong influence. This can be called an optimization problem under constraints in complexity theory. Chapter 5. The Moral Hazard of American Business, the Distortion of Capitalism and Collapse of Trust. What the Georgia crisis revealed was not simple administrative chaos. It was the tip of the iceberg of moral hazard pervading all of American society. The series of corruption and manipulation incidents occurring in the American business world are fundamentally threatening the credibility of capitalism itself. As economist Joseph Stiglitz pointed out, information asymmetry is one of the main causes of market failure. However, what's happening in America recently has moved beyond simple information asymmetry into the realm of deliberate information manipulation. The Enron scandal, Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, and recent various accounting manipulation incidents are evidence of this. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, what America so proudly called the free market economy is increasingly revealed to have been a winner-takes-all game. Adam Smith's invisible hand has disappeared somewhere, and instead, an invisible lobby dominates the market. Let's examine Tesla's case. This company, considered an icon of innovation, was revealed to actually be making profits from government subsidies and carbon credit sales. This can be called subsidy-dependent innovation, the exact opposite of Schumpeter's creative destruction theory. Boeing's fall is even more symbolic. This company, once the pride of American manufacturing, lost global trust due to the 737 MAX accidents. This was not simply a technical defect, but the result of a corporate culture that prioritized profits over safety. It's a typical case of normalization of deviance in organizational behavior. Silicon Valley's problems are even more complex. This place, called the Mecca of innovation, is now becoming a hotbed of speculation. The illusions of unicorn companies are being exposed one by one, and venture capital's speculative behavior is distorting actual innovation. The WeWork scandal clearly demonstrates these problems. This company, which packaged real estate rental as a tech company and received valuations of tens of billions of dollars before ultimately collapsing, symbolizes Silicon Valley's hype culture. It's the modern version of irrational exuberance described by behavioral economist Robert Shiller. What's even more problematic is that this corruption is linked with the political sphere. Companies routinely evade regulations or pass favorable legislation through the lobby system. This is an extreme form of what economist Mancor Olson called distributional coalitions. chaos in cryptocurrency markets cannot be overlooked either. The FTX bankruptcy showed how dangerous unregulated laissez-faire can be. Sam Bankman-Fried's fall was not simply individual deviation, but an incident that revealed structural problems in the system itself. The impact of these series of incidents on American capitalism is serious. As Brandeis University economist Thomas Philippon pointed out, the American economy is becoming increasingly monopolized. True competition is disappearing, and instead, winner-takes-all games dominate. Particularly noteworthy is the financialization phenomenon. As financial transactions occupy a larger proportion than the real economy, the entire economy has taken on a speculative character. This means Hyman Minsky's financial instability hypothesis is becoming reality. Global companies' reactions are also changing. Korea's Samsung, Japan's Sony, and Germany's Siemens are reconsidering American investment. This is judgment from a pure business risk management perspective, not just political considerations. What's paradoxical here is that the neoliberalism America has pursued is ultimately undermining capitalism's own credibility. Karl Polanyi's predicted self-destructive tendency of markets is becoming reality. In this situation, alternative capitalism models are drawing attention. Germany's social market economy, Nordic welfare capitalism, and Korea's innovation-driven growth model are examples. They all respect market mechanisms, while simultaneously emphasizing social responsibility and long-term sustainability. Chapter 6. The Twilight of Dollar Hegemony. The Psychological Foundation of Reserve Currency Shakes. Dollar hegemony is not maintained solely by military or economic power. Above all, it stands on the psychological foundation of trust. The Georgia crisis and a series of internal American chaos are shaking precisely this psychological foundation. As economic historian Barry Eichengreen explained, reserve currency status is maintained by network effects. Because it becomes more useful as more people use it, replacing an existing reserve currency is very difficult. However, once trust begins to shake, that change can proceed rapidly. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, dollar hegemony may have actually been a giant mirage built on the illusion of trust. Since the Nixon shock abolished the gold standard in 1971, the dollar has depended only on America's promise. Currently, several countries are showing movements to reduce dollar dependence. Examples include China and Russia's direct yuan-ruble trading, India's rupee payment system expansion, and the EU's Instex system. While individually small changes, when accumulated, they can significantly impact dollar demand. Korea is also actively participating in this trend. Major policies include expanding Korea-China currency swaps, activating direct won-yuan trading, and strengthening intra-Asian monetary cooperation. This is being approached from the dimension of securing strategic autonomy, beyond simple economic considerations. The emergence of cryptocurrencies also poses new challenges to dollar hegemony. Decentralized currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum are still insufficient to replace reserve currencies, but they're opening new possibilities, along with central bank digital currency development. China's digital yuan project is particularly noteworthy. This is not simply digital currency, but has potential to change the international payment system itself. If Belt and Road participating countries build payment systems utilizing digital yuan, dollar bypass transactions could expand significantly. Europe is also promoting a digital euro project. This is an attempt to reduce dollar dependence while simultaneously securing Europe's digital sovereignty. The ECB, European Central Bank, seeks to expand the euro's role in international payments through this. A more fundamental change is multipolarization. A transition from a single reserve currency system to a multiple reserve currency system is proceeding. Historically, this is similar to the pattern when British pound hegemony declined in the late 19th century, discussion of expanding the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights can also be interpreted in this context. SDR is a currency basket composed of dollars, euros, yuan, yen, and pounds, and discussions are increasing about utilizing this more in international payments.
What's interesting here is that technological innovation is accelerating these changes. Blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing are leading structural changes in existing financial systems. This means Schumpeter's creative destruction theory is being realized in the monetary sphere.
However, the end of dollar hegemony doesn't immediately mean America's downfall. Historically, reserve currency changes are gradual and complex processes. Just as Britain remained an important country even after losing pound hegemony, America will also find new roles after dollar hegemony. What's important is the international order reorganization that these changes will bring. The transition from a unipolar to multipolar system will accompany changes in all areas, including politics, military, and culture, beyond simple economic changes. Chapter 7. Divided America, Internal Fractures, Erode Diplomatic Trust. One of the most shocking facts revealed by the Georgia crisis was America's deep internal divisions. This is a fundamental fracture that shakes the very identity of America as a nation, beyond simple policy differences. Such internal divisions inevitably have negative effects on external credibility. According to political scientist Robert Dahl's pluralist democracy theory, healthy democracy operates through competition and compromise among various interest groups. However, America's current situation has moved beyond such healthy competition to take on zero-sum game aspects. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, America's proudly touted role as a beacon of democracy has now become a showcase of division. Countries worldwide are taking American-style democracy as a negative example rather than a role model. Internal divisions within the Republican Party are particularly serious. The conflict between Trump supporters and traditional Republicans has become a struggle over the party's identity itself, beyond simple policy line differences. This is an extreme form of factionalism in party politics. The Republican Party's reaction to the Georgia crisis illustrates this well. Trump supporters tried to justify it as necessity for strong immigration policy, but traditional Republican forces worried about economic adverse effects. Such divisions make consistent policy implementation difficult and ultimately lower external credibility. The Democratic Party also has problems. Conflicts between progressives and moderates, generational differences, and controversies over identity politics are weakening party unity. Although not as extreme as the Republican Party, these internal divisions still negatively affect policy consistency. What's more problematic is that such political divisions are spreading throughout society. A sharp decline in what sociologist Robert Putnam called social capital is being observed. Trust among people is crumbling, and consensus on common values or goals is disappearing. The media's role is also becoming problematic. As political bias strengthens rather than objective reporting, it has become difficult for citizens to have a common factual foundation. This means the fragmentation of what Jürgen Habermas called the public sphere. Social media's influence cannot be ignored either. As confirmation bias strengthens through algorithms, the echo chamber phenomenon, where people only communicate with those who think similarly, is intensifying. This is further accelerating social divisions. Economic inequality is also fueling political divisions. As Thomas Piketty pointed out, deepening economic inequality can lead to political instability. In America's case, as the gap between the top 1% and the remaining 99% continues to widen, social conflicts are amplifying. The impact of such internal divisions on foreign policy is serious. Policy consistency decreases, and the possibility of diplomatic lines changing drastically with each administration increases. This raises policy uncertainty for allies and makes long-term cooperation difficult. Particularly noteworthy is the sharp decline in soft power. The soft power defined by Joseph Nye is attractiveness that makes other countries want to follow voluntarily, but America's current appearance seems far from such attractiveness. Influence in international organizations is also weakening. Evaluations that America's leadership in the UN, WHO, WTO, etc. is not what it used to be are increasing. This weakens America's position in multilateral systems and ultimately creates gaps in global governance. However, such divisions are not permanent. Historically, America has overcome serious crises, including the Civil War, Great Depression, and Vietnam War, and eventually recovered. The important question is whether it can demonstrate such resilience this time as well. Chapter 8. Birth of a New Order. New Game Rules for the Multipolar Era. We now stand at a fundamental turning point in international order. The US-centered unipolar system that lasted over 70 years since World War II is shaking, and a new multipolar system is emerging. This means not simple regime change, but a change in the game rules themselves. According to international relations scholar Graham Allison's Thucydides' trap theory, conflict between existing hegemonic powers and emerging powers is inevitable. However, the changes currently occurring show more complex aspects beyond simple US-China conflict. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, a new order doesn't necessarily mean a better order. Multipolarization is more likely to increase uncertainty rather than stability, just as 19th century Europe's balance of power system eventually led to World War I. The characteristics of the new order can be summarized in three main points. First is power dispersion. The era when America alone decided everything is ending, and an era when multiple countries exercise their respective influence is coming. This is the power diffusion phenomenon in political science. Second is issue complexity. If military and economic power were the main power resources in the past, now technological capability, information power, cultural influence, and environmental response capacity have all become important factors. Joseph Nye's smart power concept is becoming reality. Third is increased importance of networks. International relations are changing from past hierarchical structures to horizontal network structures. This can be called the international expansion of the network society described by sociologist Manuel Castells. Korea occupies a unique position in this new order. It's presenting a model of creative middle power beyond the traditional middle power role. This is not simply balancing among great powers, but an active role of proposing new agendas and creating new alliances. Chapter 9. Korea's strategic choice, from dependence to independence, from imitation to creation. The current situation Korea faces is both opportunity and challenge. A historic opportunity has opened to pioneer the path of truly independent diplomacy, breaking away from the subordinate alliance relationship that lasted 70 years. But the risks and uncertainties that will accompany this process are also significant. Korea's new strategy consists of four main axes. First is economic diversification. It's about breaking away from excessive dependence on specific countries and enhancing status in global value chains. This is the national application of portfolio diversification strategy in economics. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, Korea's ability to pursue such diversification strategy is paradoxically thanks to great powers' disappointing behavior. America's declining credibility, China's economic retaliation, and Japan's export restrictions have actually made Korea seek an independent path. Second is securing technological sovereignty. It's about breaking away from technological dependence by building independent ecosystems in core technology fields like semiconductors, batteries, bio, and AI. This can be called a strategy combining Schumpeter's innovation theory and Porter's competitive advantage theory. Korea's semiconductor industry particularly occupies a core position in global supply chains, with Samsung and SK Hynix holding over 70% of the memory semiconductor market. This provides Korea with considerable technological leverage. Based on this position, Korea can secure greater voice in technology diplomacy. Third is strategic utilization of cultural soft power. It's about using the Korean wave phenomenon created by K-pop, K-dramas, and Korean films as diplomatic assets beyond simple cultural exports. This is a case of creatively applying Joseph Nye's soft power theory. What's interesting is the reason Korean cultural content is popular worldwide. The combination of Asian values, different from existing Western-centered content, and modern sensibility is creating new attractiveness. This is a successful case of what cultural anthropologist Arjun Appadurai called glocalization of culture. Fourth is leadership in middle power diplomacy. It's Korea positioning itself as mediator and problem solver in global conflict situations like US-China conflict, Russia-Ukraine war, and Middle East conflicts. This presents a creative middle power model beyond traditional middle power diplomacy. Korea's strategic transformation can be explained by various theories in international relations. From a neo-realist perspective, it's a balancing strategy. From a neoliberal perspective, it's an institutional cooperation strategy. From a constructivist perspective, it's an identity reconstruction strategy. Particularly noteworthy is the strategic ambiguity Korea pursues. It's a strategy of avoiding clear camp selection while flexibly responding according to situations. This can be called the international political application of mixed strategy in game theory. However, this strategy also carries risks. First is the credibility problem. Trying to maintain good relations with all countries might result in no one trusting you when it really matters. Second is capacity limitations. There are clear limits to the international roles that Korea, as a middle power, can handle. Third is the risk of internal conflict. Domestic political conflicts may intensify over new diplomatic lines. This is the problem of domestic international political interaction described in Robert Putnam's two-level game theory. Nevertheless, Korea's choice is both inevitable and wise. If it maintains its existing subordinate position in the rapidly changing international order, Korea will inevitably remain a peripheral state forever. According to Wallerstein's world system theory, to rise from periphery to core, one must utilize periods of systemic transition. The change Korea is showing provides important implications for other middle powers as well. This is because Australia, Canada, Mexico, Turkey, etc. are also having similar concerns. Korea's success or failure will also influence these countries' strategic choices. Furthermore, Korea's experiment can present a new international order model for the post-hegemonic era, not a hierarchical order centered on a single hegemonic power, but a horizontal order where various middle powers form networks and cooperate. This is similar to the emergence phenomenon in complexity science. New, unexpected order emerges from interactions among individual elements. It remains to be seen whether the solidarity of middle powers, including Korea, can create such a new order. Chapter 10. Choices for the future. Restoration of trust and construction of new order. We now stand at a crossroads in history. The trust crisis that began with the Georgia crisis was not simply a one-time event, but a symbolic incident that revealed the fundamental limitations of the existing international order. Now we need choices. Will we forcibly maintain the old, outdated order? Or will we create a new order? The future international order will likely develop according to one of three scenarios. The first is the restoration of American hegemony scenario. This is where America resolves internal divisions and restores international trust to exercise global leadership again. However, considering the current situation, this possibility doesn't seem very high. Adding a somewhat cynical perspective here, for America to restore hegemony, fundamental constitutional improvement is needed. Simply changing administrations is not enough. Structural problems like society-wide moral hazard, economic inequality, and political divisions must be resolved, which is not as easy as it sounds. The second is the emergence of Chinese hegemony scenario. This is where China rises as a new hegemonic power alongside America's decline. However, this also has many obstacles. These include international wariness toward China, internal economic problems, and limitations of the authoritarian system. The third and most likely is the emergence of multipolar order. This is a scenario where multiple regional powers form their respective spheres of influence rather than a single hegemonic power, and new balance is created through competition and cooperation among them. Korea's role in such multipolar order is very important. This is because it can play the role of order creator beyond simple balance keeper. By utilizing Korea's unique advantages, technological capability, cultural power, diplomatic balance, it can present new forms of international cooperation models.
However, despite such positive prospects, several challenges remain. First is capacity limitations. There are clear limits to the international roles that Korea, as a middle power, can handle. Excessive role expansion could rather produce adverse effects.
Second is geopolitical constraints. The geopolitical position of the Korean Peninsula is both opportunity and constraint. With the complex intertwining of surrounding great powers' interests, there are limits to Korea's autonomous actions. Third is the problem of internal capacity. To perform new international roles, corresponding internal capacity is needed. Human resources, institutional capacity, and social consensus must be supported. Nevertheless, the path Korea is taking is in the right direction. Rather than passively adapting to the rapidly changing international order, actively creating order is the right choice. This is a matter of whether to become a subject or object of history. What's important is making such changes sustainable. Bipartisan consensus that can maintain consistency even when administrations change is needed. Public understanding and support are also important. For new diplomatic lines to succeed, national consensus must be formed. Furthermore, if Korea's experiment succeeds, it will become an important model for other middle powers as well. This is because it can present alternatives to existing great power-centered order. This would be presenting new possibilities for all humanity, not just Korea's success. Conclusion: God's providence in history's judgment and hope. Looking back at the series of events that began with the Georgia crisis, we realize this was not simple coincidence. Throughout history, God has always humbled the proud and exalted the humble. America's loss of credibility and Korea's rise also appear to be part of such providence. The Bible clearly states in Proverbs 16:18, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." America's current crisis appears to be not simple political chaos, but the result of spiritual judgment brought by pride and greed. The illegality and moral hazard revealed in the Georgia crisis are signs of such judgment. On the other hand, Korea's rise is the fruit of humility and diligence. It's no coincidence that Korea, which quietly built its capabilities for 70 years even in a subordinate position, is now drawing attention on the international stage. However, such changes should not be simply for nationalistic pride. The new status and influence Korea has gained means greater responsibility. As Luke 12:48 says, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded." Korea must now take on greater roles for international peace and prosperity. Particularly, the soft power Korea is showing contains messages that give hope to the world beyond simple cultural exports. The reason K-dramas and K-pop are loved worldwide is because of the messages of love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and restoration they contain. This aligns with gospel values. In technology fields as well, Korea must contribute to improving human welfare beyond simple economic interests. It should lead in creating a better world through AI, biotechnology, environmental technology, etc. The fall of America and rise of Korea revealed by the Georgia crisis is not simple regime change. This is part of a greater plan God shows through human history. Worldly power is finite, but God's will is eternal. Even in today's changes, ultimately, God's righteousness and peace will be realized. We hope Korea becomes a nation used for that work, and pray it doesn't lose humility. Thank you for listening to the end. The choices we make in this turbulent era will determine the fate not only of ourselves, but of future generations. We hope Korea's counterattack and search for new order ultimately becomes hope for all nations, and that this message has been beneficial to you. If this content was helpful, please hit the YouTube subscribe button and share it with those around you. When we gather wisdom together, we can create a better future. Thank you.